Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a full review of a fragrance that I actually wish I had a 100ml bottle instead of a 50ml bottle. This is one of the few times in my entire collection where I bought a smaller bottle and then I'm going back and wishing I had bought a bigger bottle. That happened with Man by Areej, which I reviewed in the last couple weeks. And today we are going to talk about, from the house of Bond number 9, New York Oud. And you can see the dent I put in it. You can kind of see the juice floating around right there, which it's funny because in one of my videos I mentioned maybe using 10 mils or so, 5 or 10 mils is a pretty decent dent for me. And someone was like, 5 or 10 mils, that's nothing. But people forget I've got a shit ton of fragrances to go through, right? So it's not like I'm wearing the same fragrance every day. I've also put up almost 850 videos, or maybe more now, I can't keep track. And so each one of those, let's say, not all of them are individual reviews, but remember, to review a fragrance, you have to wear it, get to know it. So I'm wearing all of these different fragrances constantly. So when you see a 10 mil dent in a bottle, that means I'm wearing it as my scent of the day. It's a respectable dent is what I'm calling it. And so before I do this video, though, I almost feel like I need to give like a disclaimer, like one of those radio ads where the guy like reads it really fast in the auctioneer's voice, because this house is a house that unfortunately has been known to be quite litigious. I have heard rumors that they have sued people for buying a decant. I have heard for having a decant of a bottle. I have heard rumors that this was one of the houses that ended up having Sebastian, who is the perfume guy, his first channel, which he had, shut down. That there was some sort of an issue with a video he did, and he refuses to talk about Bond number 9 on the channel, which is a shame. You know, if you're in the perfume business, in my opinion, you should be able to take criticism. Russian Adam very famously got on here with me and said that he wants more criticism because he's tired of the fake people saying, I love this, and really, they're just saying it because they are wanting to stay on the free bottle brigade or whatever it is. There's not enough constructive criticism. So my disclaimer is that all of the opinions are obviously my own. These are only my opinions of what I'm saying in here. I do not want to be like Aaron Terrence Hughes reading from a hostage negotiation script because I said there is no oud in here, okay? I'm not going to make any claims like that. If the brand says there is oud in here, there is oud, okay? So take the brand's word for it. However, looking at the website, I must say I don't see any claims where Bond number 9 claims to use real oud. But that being said, if I'm just missing it or something, then go with what the brand says, okay? The brand will not lie to you. They will tell you the truth. And if they say they use oud, they use oud. Now, what percentage of real oud, that is a conversation for a completely different video. But we are going to take a little trip down memory lane before I review Bond number 9, New York Oud, because I feel like you have to put these oud fragrances in their place historically when they came out. And really, the reality of the situation is that any fragrance you smell, no matter what type of fragrance it is, you're smelling a fragrance that is of its time, okay? So if you smell Chanel number 19 from the early 70s, you're smelling a fragrance that was built with early 70s tastes in mind. And I know that sounds like a very no duh statement, Ramsey, but the reality of the situation is many people forget when they smell these type of fragrances that it's almost like fragrance to me is one of the best time capsules we have, period. Not just for when you wear it and it takes you back to a point in time, but bringing us back to a specific point in when the scent was created. Now, there are issues with that strategy because, of course, reformulation happens and stuff like that. That's just a part of the fragrance game. But this is a fragrance that came out in 2011. And so the trip down memory lane is going to be in the Western Oud world, which I distinguish from Western Oud and, let's say, the Middle East, where they've been wearing oud for hundreds, some say thousands of years, okay? And so in the Western world, you have to remember that oud was seen as like a foreign thing, right? So many of the French houses, many of the American designers, Halston, Ralph Lauren, houses. This is technically an American house. Bond number 9 is based in New York. She's very, very proud of her New York heritage, although I believe she was born in Paris, if I'm not mistaken. Did I read that right? Yes, born in Paris. So Laurice Ram was actually born in Paris, but I know she really identifies with the city of New York. and many of her fragrances are New York themed. So you'll see, you know, things like Bleecker Street or Central Park or Bryant Park or Brooklyn or Broadway. These are all parts of New York, right? And so there are, I must admit, there are many fragrances from the house I have never smelled. I would love to smell more from the house. I am always somebody who wants to keep an open mind and who wants to smell as much as I can. And that's why on my channel I have such a wide array of stuff. You know, many people put me in a box saying I love vintages or I like ouds or I like this or that, you know, but the reality is I love talking about everything on this channel because I'm just passionate about fragrances in general. And so to understand this fragrance in its perspective when it came out in 2011, we really have to go back to the early 2000s. So in the year 2002, Tom Ford was actually involved with Tom Ford was really involved in bringing oud to the Western perfume houses, if you will, because he was the creative director of YSL. And in 2002, he released a fragrance for the house called M7. This is what the original bottle looks like. They've since repackaged it, and it's called Oud Absolu. You can still buy it. That is an amazing starter oud, in my opinion, if you just want to spend under $100 and get a good sort of designer, easy-to-wear oud. M7 Oud Absolu is fantastic. I will review both, or maybe do a comparison video one day. But this particular version is the first version from 2002. It is discontinued, and you can see on the back the notes there with the oud, bois de oud, oud wood, basically, in 2002, and it was quite frankly a commercial failure. Okay, I think many people in the West looked at it with kind of a slight eye. I think they were very weary of it. They didn't understand it, this weird new note or whatever. And a couple houses followed suit after that. You know, I know there was technically an oud note in one of John Varvatos's early fragrances, maybe a year or two after this. There are also some niche houses that began putting oud in their fragrances, but it really didn't take off until 2007 when Tom Ford, again for his own brand, released Oud Wood. And there are definitely some similarities between these. You can really see he used this as a springboard. He was one of the only ones to see, I think, what other people missed out on. And it really speaks to the brilliance of Tom Ford to be able to capitalize on this. But when this came out and this became the hit Oud Wood that it had, I've done a video on Oud Wood. It was really more of just a ramble of everything kind of in the oud world, but I have reviewed this in a sense. You can check it out on my channel. But Oud Wood I love. You can see I've used a whole damn bottle. And I wore this almost like a signature scent for a very long time, along with Creed's Royal Oud. And so I have a lot of experience with the Western Oud houses, but in 2007, this blew up. And in the early 2010s, we started to see many of the niche houses put out their own oud take, okay? And so Creed, for example, had Royal Oud. I think that actually came out the exact same year as New York Oud, right? And anyone who was anyone had an oud fragrance at this point. Bond number 9, according to their blurb, says that they actually released a oud back in 2008 for a Harrods exclusive, they called it. It was a Harrods exclusive that they say, astonishingly, to be London Emporium's best-selling fragrance, a historic success, and we were emboldened. I'll read you the whole blurb here in just a second, but I just wanted to take you a little bit through the history because in 2011, you have to remember that this was, when this came out in 2011, this was like the new thing. This was, everyone was going crazy for oud. Dior had Oud Ispahan, and they've since released a million ouds, purple oud, and all these different types of ouds, right? I even though in my recent, let's say, fragrance journey for the last couple years, I have dived heavily into what I've ended up calling the artisanal oud houses. The houses that, for example, if you take something like Areej Dore, which I wore yesterday as my scent of the day, and I've reviewed basically every single Areej Dore fragrance that I have my access to almost. There's still a couple that I want to review, like Beauty and the Beast and stuff like that, but I have a ton of Areej Dore reviews. This is Chinese oud. You can check it out. And so in houses like Ensar, right? This is Tigerlust. I have a review of Tigerlust. I have a review of things like, for example, EO number 1. I have since gone heavy into the artisanal oud space, and really, I feel like it is one of the peak spaces for a true oud lover, because these houses use a huge amount of natural oud in their compositions, and they are quite expensive still. They're also very limited in scope, that the offerings they put out are not as, let's say, widely available. You're probably never going to get to go to a Harrods and buy an Ensar Oud fragrance, or you're probably, never going to get to go to Harrods and buy a Areej Dore or something like that, right? Or Selfridges, or wherever you shop. In the U.S., it would be Neiman Marcus or something like that, right? It's just not going to happen, right? And so there is a line in the sand for me differentiating the two. However, I still really like fragrances like New York Oud. And like I said, just because they may not use oud in as large of doses as an Ensar or an Areej Dore, it doesn't mean that there's no oud in here. There is an oud accord, and there very well may be real oud. Like I said, if the brand says they use real oud in these type of fragrances, then go with what the brand says, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about sort of that as we go on into this review. But to my nose, this fragrance bunches in, and again, I want to pick my words very carefully, because to my nose, and in my personal opinion, all right, allegedly, I would bunch this with the Western Ouds, okay? Doesn't make it bad. Does not make it bad at all. In fact, I really like this fragrance. This is my favorite Bond number 9, in case I haven't said that yet. This is my favorite Bond number 9. But I'll read you the blurb. And what else the other thing I don't know about it is, maybe in the last month or two, I reviewed my very first Bond number 9, which is a discontinued Bond number 9. It's called Andy Warhol's Silver Factory. So you can go check out my review on this one. Very happy to have the 8 mils left, or whatever's in here, in this nice little Discovery atomizer. I really like this, and actually I think this is the best fragrance from Aurélien Guichard. I really think his Maitrier Premier brand is shite, in my personal opinion. Not a fan of that house, but I've only started to review Bond number 9s, and more will come. For example, I'm going to review their signature. This is like a pure parfum. This is 100 mils of pure parfum, which is insane. And I'm going to review my most hated Bond number 9, which is this little bad boy, the Scent of Peace. Maybe the coolest thing about it is the bow tie. So there will be some negative Bond number 9 reviews coming up on the channel. But that's just the way it is. For a fragrance reviewer, there should be negative and there should be positive. And if a brand can't take that, honestly, I don't think that they should put fragrances out in the marketplace. People will have their own opinions. You can't stop people from having an opinion. That is just, that's too Orwellian, especially in a place like America, where I am recording this bad boy. So let me read the blurb, and let's talk about my favorite Bond number 9, New York Oud. And so here's the blurb according to the website. Oh, and by the way, the reason I mentioned that Andy Warhol's Silver Factory is discontinued is that Parfumo says that New York Oud is still in production, but there are some rumors floating around that it is discontinued. And if you go to her website, if you go to bondnumber9.com, you will notice 100 mils of this, which this is a 50 mil bottle, but 100 mils of this sells for $470, which is like 50 mils sells for $330, which is still, but it says it's sold out, and it's been sold out for a very long time on her website. So I'm not sure what is going on, if they're having a hard time finding materials to make it, or what. I have no clue what is going on with it. I don't know if it's just discontinued officially and it hasn't been taken down, or if they're just waiting to restock. I don't know. But rumor is that this has potentially been discontinued. So here's the blurb according to the Bond number 9 website. At Bond number 9, the oud has come out of the closet and transformed itself into a smooth, full-throttle, New York-centric perfume. What a paradox! Who knew? But then, New York is a place where impossible, magical paradoxes come true. And then it goes into the notes. And that is literally it. I wish some of these houses would work on their description. That's all that she has up on the website right now. However, there is some older information from the brand, and it says, New York Oud, the name says it all. Bond number 9 is launching an expectation-defying oud, a beautiful contradiction in terms that's reinvented the whole idea of this much-discussed perfume phenomenon. The trick, of course, was to modernize and urbanize that exotic staple, the oud, and give it a New York verve that it's never had before. A paradox, to be sure. But then, New York is a place where impossible magical paradoxes come true. It's only fitting that our beloved city should be giving a seemingly self-contradictory oud perfume of its own. And fortunately, we have some experience with ouds. Back in 2008, we introduced our first for Harrods that proved astonishingly to be the London Emporium's best-selling fragrance, a historic success, and we were emboldened. I've never smelled that one, by the way. For our 10th anniversary last year, we quietly developed a second oud, Bond Number 9 Oud, that mingled Eastern and Western fragrance sensibilities. But was it enough? No. What remained was to test the limits of the oud, put it through a sea change, and modernize it for our high-energy metropolitan landscape. Enter New York Oud, which launches in time for Valentine's Day 2011, though we chose to retain the androgynous nature of the old world oud. There is otherwise nothing traditional or incense-laden about our new version. Instead, we've given it a dynamic, self-assured smoothness, an adventurously creamy velvet texture it's never had before. At its heart is a sumptuous rose bouquet, which soon spins off into the all-important dry down that defines this perfume. A dense and syrupy oud that joins forces with musky teak wood, another welcome new addition to Western perfumery. Actually, there is a teak wood note in a couple of fragrances, which I have discussed on the channel and will be reviewing soon. For example, there is a teak wood note in this bad boy right here. This is Trussardi's Inside for Man, which I will be reviewing. This is a discontinued Nathalie Lorson. There is a teak wood note in here. An earthy vetiver to create a lingering urban forest accord, and linger it will. Its oud concentration is a full 30%, not the typical 20% of eau de parfum. So, what's interesting about that statement, though, is that it sounds like in that blurb to me, she's talking about concentration of like perfume oil. Usually anything over 30% is a pure parfum, which if you look at the bottom of Signature, this one, which is a completely different fragrance, it actually says parfum on the bottom. But if you look at the bottom of New York Oud, it actually says eau de parfum. So, and what's interesting, I don't know how, maybe maybe the original one was a pure parfum. I have no clue. I am truly an outsider with the House of Bond Number 9. I only own a couple of them, and I've shown you basically all of them in this video. And look at that note listing, though. It is a very short note listing. It just says, fragrance, deionized water, SD alcohol, 40-B. That's it. That sounds like a vintage, old school note listing if I've ever seen one. And so, interesting. I just thought that was very interesting. I don't know if I happen to have an older bottle and the new ones have longer note listings, or if Bond Number 9, that's just the way they do their note listing. I have no clue. But I just found that very, very interesting. So let's talk about the scent and let's talk about the notes. So basically, now that we've discussed the history of Western Oud and you basically know where we are at in 2011, remember this was like the hot thing in 2011, is what I get from New York Oud. When you first spray, you're basically hit with this combo of a sweet, juicy plum, rose, oud, and saffron. Traditional saffron, okay? Proper saffron. The saffron in here. So what I love about this scent is that, yes, it is a rose, oud, saffron. Yes, it absolutely is. You cannot get away from that. And that is a traditional combination that now, in 2024, looking back, many people go, oh, God, another rose oud, okay? And I completely understand why they do that. However, one of the things that I love about Bond Number 9 New York Oud is that it doesn't smell like any of the other, you know, traditional oud, saffron, let's say, Western ouds that you've smelled. You know, if you've smelled all these Versace Pour Oud Noir and M7, and, you know, you've smelled the Oud Woods and stuff like that, to me, New York Oud stands apart. It's different, okay? And it's different for a couple reasons. But if you've smelled some of the fruitier ouds, like, for example, I've done a review on the channel from the House of Centauri of a very rare, hard to find oud fragrance that he actually worked with Ensar Oud, okay, to create, called Chambeau. And Chambeau used a lot of fruity ouds. So there were things like Borneo Oud, Papau Oud, Thai Oud, Cambodian Oud, all that good stuff, right? And the accord of oud that you got in Chambeau, you can go check out my review, but it was very, very fruity, okay? So you got lots of different berries, strawberries, cherry flavors from the ouds, and all these different fruity notes kind of coming at you. Here, they have accentuated this oud accord in New York Oud with plum, okay? And the plum, when you mix that very red, think of this deep, dark, just think of a woman in deep red lipstick biting into this extremely, I don't want to say rotten, but I do want to say that it has sat on your counter for a while, okay? So imagine deep, dark red lipstick biting into this juicy, the inside is so red it's almost black, right? And the juices, of course, and just all of that imagery. That is really the color of New York Oud to me. It's not, the color of the bottle, although I really do like the bottle. And I like the see-through New York City Bond number 9 sort of logos all over the bottle. But the color to me is that deep dark red, because what ends up happening is that Oud accord is accentuated with this sort of heavy plum, okay, red, slightly sweetened plum, but it's mixed with a honey note, and the honey note almost gives the plum a wine touch. And I'm friends with a Korean family, and once or twice they've brought over plum wine, which is the only time I've ever had it in my life, a couple times. And it always brings New York Oud to mind. Anytime I smell New York Oud, I'm always reminded of this plum wine. And many times in perfumery, when you mention wine notes, people will think of things like, Burberry's London for Men. And there's a very interesting wine note in here. I'll review this one of these days as well, because I do think it's one of the better designer fragrances Burberry has put out. But, if you know that type of heavy, here it's a port wine. Here it's more of a plum wine smell to me. But I just want you to get sort of in the mindset of this sweetened plum sort of mixing with this honey in a way that almost makes the brew feel so thick and boozy in a sense that it doesn't feel like a boozy fragrance, okay? I wouldn't put this, like if I was doing a alcoholic boozy fragrances where we're talking about things like cognac and rum and vodka, which there is vodka in some perfumes, I would not include this fragrance in that. But just the texture and the way it feels, it almost comes across as a heavy plum wine. If you've ever had plum wine, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The sweetness in here, the honeyed aspect being sort of mixed in. Just imagine like a KitchenAid mixer going in the kitchen at full blast, okay? And I just want you to imagine slowly dripping in honey into this mixture. You already have all the stuff in the cake that you're making, and now you are adding just a little bit of honey, the final touches, if you will, right? So when you taste it, unless you just have an unbelievable palate, you're not going to taste the honey, but the honey makes it gives it a little bit of that heavier molasses feel, okay? The concoction adds to the earthiness of the other notes in here, right? And there are some very interesting earthy notes in here with the vetiver. I would guess, and again, this is just my opinion, allegedly, is that I would guess, I need to stop making that joke, but I would guess that there is some sort of cypriol or something in here as well, adding to the earthiness of the vetiver and making that final Oud accord. But the molasses feel of the concoction from the honey doesn't make the honey smell like Boss Number 1 or Tenade by Paco Rabanne from the 80s or anything like that. It doesn't have a heavier honey. You're not going to pick out an old school honey note, okay? It doesn't smell like Miel de Bois or any of those honey fragrances. It just adds texture to the main star, which is that Oud accord. And the Oud accord to me is most prominent in the first couple hours. In fact, it's actually most prominent as soon as the fragrance hits your skin. And it's actually the heaviest smelling as soon as the fragrance hits your skin. It's almost like this dusty, dry, woody vibration is the way that I describe it, okay? And I've associated that woody vibration feel with many of these Western type Oud fragrances that I would, put this on the Western Oud style side. And so, the twist here, all right, is that, and before I go any further, I just want to sort of re-emphasize, if you're really interested in learning about oud, which I have, I would say probably in the last couple of years, the one ingredient that I thought I was educated about, that I have been given a lesson in a true schooling, a hard knocks lesson in, is oud. Okay, so if you go watch my really early videos from, end of 21 or early 22, middle of 2022, stuff like that, I was almost completely ignorant of many of these houses that I have a ton of videos on the channel now. So if you want to learn, go to my playlist, click on Agar, click on Areej Dore, click on Ensar Oud, click on Sultan Pasha. Those brands I've got a ton of reviews on the channel about, and it is really like stepping into a different world. I mean, it really is. And I was very fond and proud of myself for being able to say, I like to go everywhere, because I used to say, I like niche, I like expensive, I like cheap, I like designers, I like vintage, I like modern. But the reality is there was an entire world that I was just ignorant about, because, if you go to Harrods, if you go to, these type of stores, Macy's here in the US or whatever it is, right? I mentioned Neiman Marcus earlier. I don't think Barney's is around anymore. But if you go, even those higher end stores, you will not find some of the brands that I am mentioning here. You need to go and specifically search and go to their website. And Areej Dore is dropping a new collection soon. It'll probably sell out in 0.01 seconds. It's crazy. So you got to sit there and click your buy button as fast as you can, hoping you get a bottle. It's a different world. It really is. And the reason that people do that is, once you smell some of those artisanal fragrance houses that use oud in a high concentration, a heavy dose in their perfumes, it is some people say that they completely fall out of love with the rest of their entire collection and just turn into what are called oud heads, right? And so if you want to learn about some of that, I have a lot of resources on the channel for you to check out. But it's interesting, because even though I mention all of that, in one of my interviews with Russian Adam, he asked me this question verbatim. He said, Ramsey, how come you know all of this information that you're telling me, and yet you still like brands like Roja and those type of houses? And honestly, I didn't have an answer for him, but the reality is that I just do. I'm a sucker for this type of perfumery, the exact type of perfumery we are talking about today. I love this style. These oud fragrances, even these that many see nowadays as, some people think once you start wearing things like Ensar, Areej Dore, you can never go back and wear a fragrance like, Versace Pour Oud Noir, which I paid 40 bucks for or something. You can never wear that anymore, and I completely disagree. I love wearing these type of fragrances. I still enjoy wearing them. But when you will be able to see the distinction when you wear them, there are definite differences between them. And one thing that is interesting, though, is as you get to know some of these brands, sometimes you'll pick out some similarities. Like, there is a very interesting sort of oud rose. I think there's a little bit of musk in here. Again, just my personal opinion, that harkens just a little bit of a reference to this one, which I'll do a full review on this one day as well, the Bond Number 9 signature, as they call it. But there is apparently an iris note that seems to run through a lot of the Bond Number 9s that I have smelled, this musky, powdery, irisy thing, right? And the iris here feels, it actually, so when you smell New York Oud, a lot of times you're not going to just go, oh, I get the honey, or oh, I get the iris. Those are the notes that make up the texture of the composition, but a lot of times you won't be able to pick them out. But what you'll be able to pick out is that you'll be able to sort of get bits and pieces here and there. So like for the iris, for example, you may smell, sometimes there's a little bit of a rooty, green, chalky aspect, but it doesn't smell like an out and out in your iris, in your face iris. It smells like it's part of the whole cake. It's the baked cake composition like I talked about earlier. So you'll get aspects, all right? And it blends with the powdery, sweet contrast of the very deep, dark, jammy rose. Think of the red lipstick that I mentioned on A Beautiful Woman earlier. And speaking of contrast, or paradox, if you will, according to Bond Number 9's website, paradox is there are green touches to the rose as well. The rose here, yes, it's jammy and fruity And, you know, you get these different aspects. Even the rose, I think, has some honeyed aspects to it that play well with the honey and patchouli and stuff like that in there. But it is contrasted with some green touches as well. So the iris adds a little bit of the rooty greenness. The rose adds a little bit of the greenness. And there is this orange zest that kind of hits you in the top. And sometimes the orange zest feels like it adds just a little bit of freshness. Sometimes it smells candied, like you're smelling the candied orange peel accord in something like Serres Lutens Areej, right? That heavy, thick, candied orange, right? Sometimes it feels a little bit like that. This is overall a very thick and heavy fragrance. It's a, they consider it maybe like a floriental, if you will, or a woody spicy. I don't know how you would technically describe this type of fragrance nowadays. But the way I would describe the scent on my skin is that the vibration from that oud accord, when it first begins, it's at its peak, okay? So it's almost like the earthquake has just happened, all right? And the vibration on your skin, when that oud accord hits, you really can, it's almost like a nose tingling woody vibration, okay? And, you know, there are some people who have speculated that this oud accord is being built by a lot of different ingredients, which we can talk about later on in the video. But the path of the way that the oud accord acts on my skin is that as time goes on, all right, those vibrations lessen. Almost like after the earthquake hits, maybe you get the aftershocks and they're not as heavy and stuff like that. But as the vibrations lessen, all right, and you smell less of the oud and patchouli and stuff like that, then you can really pick up more of the details, all right? So as time ticks by and the vibration from the oud at first is rich and thick and heavy and almost jolting. Some people say this is a jarring, jolting scent at first. I like those type of fragrances because I like fragrances that, you know, sort of shock you a little bit in the opening. And I like what they did with the oud accord here. But as the vibrations begin to slowly die down, you get more of the details of the notes, if that makes sense. So the one thing you should understand though is that the vibrations of the oud never go away. Okay, so that tingly vibration of the oud, even 8 to 10 hours in, which I wore this as my scent of the day. I applied it at 7:30 in the morning before I went to work. It is 6:45 right now. I can still smell the dry down. I mean, we're talking 10 to 12 hours on this fragrance. It is a very, very long fragrance. And before I left work, before I sprayed this and it kind of drowned out this, I can still pick this out. But before I left work, before I did another spray, this was much more prominent. Okay, so I will tell you that it lasts a long time and it's very heavy. All right. The vibrations of the oud, if you want to stick with my metaphor, never go away. They never truly go away, okay? They slowly begin to die down, and you can pick out more of some of the other notes, but they never go away, even after 8, 10, 12 hours, right? That's basically a major part of the scent. That's one of the things I like about it. And I wouldn't be surprised, I mentioned this earlier, but I would not be surprised if the perfumer, whose name is Laurent Leguernec, by the way, I am not familiar with Laurent's work, other than yesterday I showed this as one of the bottles on This Is Not a Top This Year in Perfumery from 2016, and it was called Sarah Jessica Parker's Stash, and Laurent made this. So I guess I am somewhat familiar with some of the things Laurent has done. I guess Laurent is a she. I'm sorry, I really don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Apologies. But I don't know. I guess I should know that. Laurent, is that a Laurent? Yves Saint Laurent? Well, that's not what I'm looking at. It means the bright one, the shining one. It is derived from the Roman surname Laurentius. That's a badass name. I guess it's a... I guess it's a man. I honestly don't know. Leave it in the comments. Let me know. But my guess is that Laurent used a couple different things to build that oud accord. And patchouli is actually mentioned in the note listing. Okay, so there's definitely patchouli in there. And patchouli, patchoulol, this sort of very common In fact, Russian Adam told me a story once about testing what was given to him as an oud, and it was something like 99% patchouli. That's a story that he shared with me once. Has nothing to do with this particular fragrance, but just something, he was like, this is why many times we do GCMS testing and test our oils to make sure it actually is exactly what we expected in, because when you have an item, an ingredient as special and sought after and expensive as oud, sometimes there are people in the market who are not as trustworthy as you would like, right? But it's very common to build an oud accord, and that's one of the things that a perfumer is really paid for. You know, they are paid for, and if you listen to some of the best perfumers talk, they will tell you one of their favorite things of creating perfume is for you to smell something that is not there, right? And they do that on purpose. Jean-Claude Elena is he's a master at doing this, right? And so creating, let's say, an accord of, he did it with Rose and Queer. Rose and Queer, the joke is he created a fragrance called Rose and Queer with no rose and no queer, right? Or no rose and no leather, for you non-French speakers. So, but yes, you created that rose accord out of geranium and all these other ingredients to give it a rose aspect, but there's no rose in it. Well, that's the rumor, anyways. So, but I say that because I would not be surprised if there are a couple other things in here creating this oud accord, like Cypriol, for example. And if you've watched some of my reviews of other high-end houses that compete price-wise with something like this, so go watch my review of Roja's Taif Oud. Okay, that's even more expensive than this. 100 mils of this is $470. I think 100 mils of the Roja is like $680 or something, right? But I mentioned in the beginning, it smells like there's a huge hit of Cypriol in that. That's just my opinion. I don't know that. I'm not testing these fragrances. I'm not standing up here and saying I'm a perfumer and I'm telling you exactly what I smell. No, this is just my personal opinion. But I would not be surprised if there's some earthy Cypriol in here to create that oud accord. But it is very well done. I have to be subjective. I have to be Switzerland. I have to be in the middle. But I cannot put my tastes aside 100%. Much of this is detailing my journey, and the reality is I love these type of oud fragrances. I do not hide that fact. Now lately, once you really get into the artisanal, it's going to be hard because you want to constantly reach for something like Chinese oud, or, you know, some of the Ensars I mentioned earlier. Yesterday I was wearing War and Peace. That is an absolutely mind-blowing fragrance, which I have reviewed on the channel. And so just imagine this very well done oud accord. And so the breakdown of the scents, basically that candied orange peel sometimes gives freshness, sometimes gives that, well, sometimes it doesn't feel like a candied orange peel. Sometimes it feels like zesty orange. Sometimes it feels like the candy orange peel. And just imagine it working with the red plum, all right? And if you can just imagine this plum is deep and dark and red, almost to the point of fermentation. This was an interesting point that hit me like a lightning bolt as I was making the end of my notes for this video, is that obviously wine is usually fermented grapes, and oud is, a lot of times they will soak oud and it will be fermented. Very similar bacterial structure to what goes on in your stomach. If you've ever heard of kombucha, where they will ferment tea, it's a very similar bacterial process that happens, okay? And actually, if you ferment tea and do it in a similar fashion as you're doing with oud, rumor is that it will actually have similar structures, smell structures to what you're used to smelling with fermented oud. And when that idea of fermented red plum hit me, because we were talking about earlier in the review, we were talking about this plum wine feeling to New York Oud. It really brought it all together, because that is where I think there is this very interesting connection to make between the oud, which is obviously fermented in many situations. I don't think all oud distillers soak their oud, though. Again, we're mixing the worlds back and forth. But if you listen to someone like Ensar speak, he will say that he does not like to soak his oud before it is distilled, because he thinks it changes the smell. Others say you have to soak, you don't get enough yield otherwise. So there's all this back and forth and debate and discussion and stuff like that. But imagine the fermented plum, creating that plum wine accord, really giving it that very interesting connection, working with that jammy rose that is extremely red. Imagine the woman with the red lipstick, right? And the color of just a deep dark red rose, and mixing with the ruddy green aspects of the iris, and the powdery musky side, which is not listed, the chemically saffron, which gives it that rose oud saffron like accord, which I absolutely love. And yes, that is basically, you know, the fragrance. And as it dries, the vibrations from the oud get less and less, and you can pick up many of the other details. I think it's a fantastic Western style oud, as I am calling it. So again, I know I was kind of walking on eggshells trying to be completely politically correct, because this brand has a, let's say, a history in FragCom, and it's one of the reasons I never reviewed any of their scents. But you know what? It's ridiculous. I honestly do believe people should have the ability and the freedom to say what they believe. And in my opinion, a brand that goes after somebody for something like this is not a brand that I would personally like to support. So I would like to see brands that have done that in the past change their ways, in my opinion. If that is something that happened, again, all of this is rumor, conjecture. I don't know what happened between Sebastian and Bond number 9, but I do know that as a member of FragCom, you know, I agree with AC's description of FragCom, where it's like a well, and we all put things in it. You can either put something in or you can take something out. And these houses are part of the fragrance game, whether they like it or not. Some people, some houses take advantage of FragCom by sending free bottles and using people like me who make videos as marketing tools. And some people love it because they get free bottles out of it. The free bottle brigade is definitely real. And so FragCom and fragrances are interconnected. There's no getting around it, especially nowadays, where I can just click play and hit upload and bam, I'm in your living room, right? Hocus pocus. Magic, as Bond number 9 says. Paradox, magical. And so a magical paradox come true. So anyways, enough rambling. It's been almost 42 minutes. I have been wanting to make this video for a long time because it touches on a topic I love talking about, just the oud history of where it came from, where we are in the process. And, you know, if this truly is discontinued and, you know, a 50 ml bottle was for $330 retail, don't go pay $600-700 for this. It's just, in my opinion, it's not worth it. You know, if you can find it at a respectable price like I did, then that may be something to consider. But I do think that is a pretty, I haven't looked at Bond number 9 pricing in a long time. And when I saw some of the prices, I have to tell you, I was a little taken aback. I did not know that some of the Bond number 9s were that expensive. I know fragrance prices have gone up, but some of the pricings really, really took me back. Like one of them that was pretty well hyped was a fragrance called Nomad, which I've never smelled before, but 100 mils is $460. And it's like, my God, that just seems like so much to me. But I know that's the niche market. That's kind of where everything's going. But I love you guys who follow me and watch me and like the videos and subscribe and comment and all that stuff. We're adding something like 500 subscribers a month on average. And it's funny because you can always tell, you know, the channels who work for their subscribers, like me, and the ones who buy their subscribers. There are definitely channels out there that do not play the subscriber game fair. They think subscribers means that it's good. And so I celebrate every 1,000 subscribers. Well, I have been, but we've been adding them at like 500 a month or every 28 days or whatever the algorithm monitors. So it is going to be very hard to continue to do every 1,000 like a celebratory video. I love making the videos. I love celebrating milestones because honestly, it gives me a reason to talk about perfume, which I love. I worked all day. It's 7 o'clock at night. I'm sitting here making this video. I haven't even eaten dinner yet. So I obviously put the time and effort and love, and you can tell I'm passionate about it. I hope that shines through in the videos, and I hope you guys learned something, either about the fragrance or the history of oud as we were discussing. There will be more reviews on some of these fragrances I showed today, which I have not reviewed. some of these. Something like this is definitely getting a comparison video to M7 Oud Absolu. And then these two bond number 9s are on the docket. This will probably be good. This is going to be a bad review. I hate this stuff. I absolutely despise the centerpiece, but I'm an Aventus guy. So, you know, again, you have to take the person who's making the video and giving their opinion into account. So I'm a huge Aventus guy. So the centerpiece for me is I think it's, I just really, honestly, I'm keeping the bottle because I want to still review it. But I would wear, if I had Aventus at my disposal, I would wear Aventus every single time over the centerpiece. But that's just my personal opinion. So anyways, I've been in a rambling mood today. So this was a long video. I appreciate everyone watching and commenting. I'll catch you guys next time. Cheers. See you later. Bye-bye.